Toy-polloi, a shadowy flight into the dangerous world of a toy restorer who does not exist. Toy-polloi, a young loner on a crusade to champion the cause of the broken, the helpless, the powerless, in a world of collectors who operate above the law.
Welcome to Toy-polloi. No Legos were harmed in the making of this video.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi. Now today we're going to take a look at fixing a very common problem with these vintage 1984 Galoob Golden Girl toys. As you can see here I have two copies of Golden Girl, and both of them have been suffering from the same problem, which is these detached legs. I've actually managed to fix the one on the right, but as you can see I've left this one so I can show you how to do it. Now this is a toy line that I don't particularly remember. As I say, it's from 1984 and it's clearly a sort of female equivalent to He-Man. So let's take a quick look at an advert for this toy line and then we'll get on with the fix.
Someday I'm going to be an acrobat. I'm going to be in the Olympics. I'm going to be Golden Girl. Golden Girl. And have flowing blonde hair, a magical shield and sword. Together with Ruby, Jade, and Onyx, we'll defeat Dragon Queen, Wild One, and Voltora. Golden Girl and the Guardians of Gemstones. Golden Girl and the Guardians of the Gemstones, each sold separately, new from Galoob.
So here we have two Golden Girl figures, and as you can see this one on the left is suffering from a broken leg. In fact the one on the right was broken as well, but I've obviously done a bit of a fix and managed to repair that. Now these toys are actually quite clever in the way they're constructed. They have a sort of ball joint on the top of the hip which is connected to a sort of middle point in the pelvis. So you get quite a lot of rotation on the legs. You can rotate them all the way around. They also have a jointed knee, so you can bend them like that, a little bit like sort of Barbies and Cindy's. But obviously the weak point is this peg that sort of holds the ball joint in the top of the leg, and it snaps. And I've seen this on a few of these toys. Both of these, as I say, had the same problem, and I've had a quick look online to see what other people are saying, and it does seem to be a very common issue, and no one really has a good fix for it. So I thought I'd sort of sit down and work out a way that we could reattach this ball joint into the hip section there and also keep the full mobility. If you look here, this leg was broken on this figure, and you can see that this one is fully rotatable. Everything works and you can pose it exactly the same as the other leg. So there is a way to do it, and I will show you now how that needs to be done. The first thing we're going to work on is the leg, and we actually need to trim down the post that's inside this leg. They snap off roughly at the same place each time, and we're going to need to trim off maybe sort of 2 millimeters worth of that leg post. So I'm just going to rotate this to the back. I've got a pair of plastic nippers here. I'm going to push that in and just trim off the top of it to make it flatter. The plastic is fairly brittle, so it's easy to work with. It does sort of cut quite nicely. I've got some pliers here just so I can move it back to the center position. And now we're going to need to drill a very small hole in it. So I have here my pin vise and a selection of drill bits, and I've chosen the 0.75 millimeter drill bit which is in the pin vise here. We're now going to drill a very small hole in the top of this peg. Now this is the fairly tricky bit just because it's sort of a small area to work with, but the great thing with the pin vise is you can easily sort of control what you're doing and just drill in ever so slowly. And we're drilling right into the center of this post, and we need to go in a few millimeters. Should be enough, so you can now see, if I get this to focus, there is a tiny hole drilled in the end of the leg post. Once we have that hole drilled, we then got to attach a little eyelet to it. Now I bought some of these incredibly tiny little eyelets when I was fixing Snake Mountain, the Masters of the Universe play set, and making some new wrist restraints. As you can see, these are pretty tiny little things. You can buy these on eBay. They are fairly cheap to buy. I've actually just got a few of them left in my pack here, and these measure, if I just put this on the sort of measuring board here, top to bottom they are about 8 millimeters, and the little screw section of it is about 1 millimeter, which is why we drilled a 0.75 millimeter hole in the leg peg there. So I'm going to take a pair of pliers and then very carefully screw this into the end where we've made the hole. Make sure you go nice and slowly with this, don't sort of push it and force it, so that you keep everything lined up because the worst thing that you want to do is actually split this leg post at this point. And there you go, that's now screwed in quite firmly there into the leg post, and we can use that to reattach the leg to the body. For the next stage, we need to thread some elastic through this groin section and over the post that you can see there in the middle. And the first thing we've got to do is actually get a bit of wire around that so that we can pull the elastic through. So I have some beading wire here. This is very sort of thin, easy to work with stuff, and I'm going to just make a little sort of loop section like that. We can then push that up into the body, and we want to actually go over the back end of the post, so onto the sort of the back side of the figure. So I'm just going to push that up into the cavity and then pull that down. You can see that the other side of the wire comes through, so that's the easy way of getting a little bit of wire through. So I can now just pull this through a little bit more, and then I have some elastic here. This is just normal elastic. It's about sort of 1 to 2 millimeters in diameter, and this is round elastic, and it's got a nice sort of stretch to it. I found this works particularly well. You can get this from most sort of haberdashery shops. If you just go in and ask for round elastic, they'll have something that's about this sort of diameter, but you want it to have quite a sort of good elasticity to it. So I'm now just going to attach this by wrapping the wire around it a few times. And then we can push the wire back up into the body and hopefully hoop the elastic through. Let's do that. There we go. Now we've got the elastic through and over the peg in the middle. Once the elastic's through, we can then start attaching the leg. So we've got to thread one end of the elastic through the little eyelet that we've put onto the leg post. Again, sometimes you need a pair of tweezers or something just to help you sort of pull the elastic through, because these are all quite sort of small areas. And we can now start tying this leg in. So all I'm going to do is tie a simple knot and then pull it really, really taut, so that we're pulling the elastic really quite sort of short, if you know what I mean. So pull it really taut, and then we're going to do a second knot, and again pull this as tight as you can, because you want it really tight so that the leg gets pulled into the sort of pelvis there. So that's feeling pretty good. So all we've got is two ends of elastic, which if I get a pair of scissors we can cut those off, and the leg should sit back in place. So we can cut those quite close. And there you go, the leg is now back and attached, and it should be able to be rotated all around. And there we have it, two golden girls with their legs reattached. As I say, it's a fairly simple process. The trickiest bit is actually drilling the hole into the sort of old leg post, but if you get yourself a pin vise, then that is actually relatively straightforward, and I've shown you how to use these a few times in other videos, and I really would recommend just getting yourself one. They're very cheap, and it's a worthwhile toy fixing tool. And as you can see, the figures look just as good as they should do, and they do pose fully, which is the really important thing with this figure, that you can actually pose the legs around and they stay in the correct sort of places. Now I want to say a big thank you to Rob Taylor, who very kindly sent me a box of sort of bits and remains of old figures, and that's where these two figures came from. So thanks to Rob for these, because it's always useful to have a sort of box of broken toys, because that's how I end up making these videos. So I hope this video on repairing a vintage Golden Girl's broken leg has been of interest to you, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching toy-polloi. Subscribe for more great videos. You can also follow toy-polloi on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.